how I love the Holy Spirit, and how I long for you to know him, really know him, not as a doctrine, not as a concept, but as a person. He's more real to me than any living person in this room, and I can tell you with every breath in my being he speaks. There are times in life when your body feels heavy and weary, but not in the usual sense. You haven't overworked yourself. You slept enough. There's no clear reason to explain why you're suddenly so tired, and yet it's there, a strange tiredness. It lingers like a gentle fog, not loud or painful, but persistent. You try to shake it off with coffee or distraction, but nothing lifts it. Many brush this off, thinking it's just stress, or maybe some hidden illness, or even just a lazy mood. But what if it's not? What if that strange tiredness is not random at all, but a divine whisper? So many of us expect the Holy Spirit to speak through obvious signs. We want a booming voice, a flashing light, a powerful dream. We want certainty, and yet the Holy Spirit, gentle as he is, often chooses a more subtle way. He doesn't always come with thunder or wind. Sometimes he comes with a whisper that settles into your spirit like a hush, a quiet invitation for you to stop, to sit, to notice. That's what this strange tiredness can be. It is not always fatigue in your muscles, but a pull in your spirit, a tug from God that says, "Come apart with me for a while." You may find yourself canceling plans, avoiding noise, searching for solitude without even knowing why. You think you're just off, but it's the Spirit of God shifting your rhythm. He knows when you need rest, but even more than that, he knows when your soul is ready to receive something. Sometimes the only way he can get your attention is by allowing this fatigue to quiet you down, to soften your distractions, to remove your sense of momentum. Because he knows when you're moving too fast, you don't listen. You don't see, and more than anything, you don't feel. He wants to speak to you, not through your intellect, not through your ambition, but through your stillness. And that strange tiredness, it creates that stillness. It opens up a space in your heart and body that says, "I need to pause. I can't keep running." It's in that pause where you become aware not of your surroundings, not of your tasks, but of him. You might feel guilty for resting. Our world is addicted to movement. Rest is seen as weakness. But the Holy Spirit is not interested in your performance. He's not moved by your checklists or your calendar. He is drawn to your surrender. And strange tiredness is often the forerunner to surrender. When your strength feels gone, when you can't push anymore, you're finally quiet enough to receive. You might be tempted to resist it. You'll want to push through. You'll tell yourself, "I don't have time for this." But don't fight it. Don't dismiss it. That weariness could be sacred. It could be the Holy Spirit preparing to speak in a way that bypasses your intellect and goes straight to the core of who you are. So many of his greatest works happen in stillness, in the hidden places, in the moments when no one else sees you, when it's just you and him. When you begin to recognize this tiredness for what it truly is, not just exhaustion, but divine invitation, you'll stop trying to escape it. Instead, you'll step into it. You'll begin to say, "Holy Spirit, if this is you, I'm here. Speak to me." And in that moment of honesty, in that fragile state of being, he'll begin to reveal things you missed when you were too busy. Things about your heart, about your direction, about the people in your life. Sometimes it's correction. Sometimes it's comfort. Sometimes it's simply his presence, warm, quiet, healing. This strange tiredness may even be protecting you. You were about to take a path he didn't want you on. You were about to commit to something that looked good, but wasn't from him. And so he let your strength fade, so you'd slow down long enough to notice his redirection. It's not punishment, it's protection, it's love. Others may not understand. They might say you're being lazy. They may question why you seem distant, why you're not as productive. But when the Holy Spirit is working, when he is speaking in this gentle way, You cannot explain it with words. You can only follow. You can only yield. He knows how to get your attention, not with force, but with a divine tenderness. This strange tiredness is a sacred signal. It's not random. It's not meaningless. It is often the beginning of something holy, something transformative. If you quiet yourself long enough to embrace it, you'll find he was there all along, waiting for you to notice. So next time that tiredness comes, don't just lie down physically. Lie down spiritually. Rest not just your body, but your soul. Let him speak. Let him renew. Let that weariness become a doorway to glory. Because sometimes the whisper of God feels like a weight. But oh, what beauty it brings when you answer the call. There is a tendency within all of us to look for God in the dramatic. We expect him to speak in thunder, in flashes of light, in dreams that shake the night, or in signs that leave no room for doubt. It's in our nature to want something we can point to and say, that was him. But the Holy Spirit, oh, how tender he is, how gentle, how subtle, and how often we miss him not because he is absent, but because we are waiting for him to speak in the way we have decided he should. He doesn't always come with fire and noise. Sometimes he comes in the softest silence. Sometimes he comes in stillness, in a strange pause that interrupts the rhythm of your day. And sometimes, yes, sometimes he comes cloaked in something as ordinary and unassuming as tiredness. Not the kind of tiredness that comes after hard labor or a sleepless night. No, this tiredness is different. It doesn't make sense. It comes out of nowhere, and it lingers with a weight that seems to press on your spirit, not just your body. You find yourself sitting in a chair, staring off, unable to gather momentum. You try to engage in your usual tasks, but there's a fog over everything. Not confusion, more like a gentle heaviness. You think maybe you're coming down with something, or that your emotions are off. But nothing else is wrong. It's just, you can't seem to move forward. This is where you must begin to discern, because the Holy Spirit does not always announce himself with fanfare. Sometimes he simply withdraws your energy so that he can redirect your attention. You must remember he is a person, not a force, not a mood, but a living, moving, speaking person, and he longs for communion with you. He desires fellowship not in the noisy, crowded spaces of life, but in the stillness where you can hear his voice without interruption. He knows that if he speaks while you're busy, you'll only hear a fraction. If he speaks while you're striving, your heart will be too full to receive it. And so he quiets you. He calls you away. But instead of shouting your name, he often allows your strength to fade, so that you slow down enough to hear him whisper. It is so easy to dismiss these moments, to reach for a stimulant, to fill the space with distraction. But when you do that, you are pushing past the very moment the Spirit was trying to create. You are stepping over the invitation. He won't force you. He will simply wait. And what a tragedy it is when we confuse divine silence with absence. Or worse, when we treat the gentle drawing of the Spirit as an inconvenience to be shaken off. You see, we have grown so accustomed to noise, both external and internal, that we have forgotten how to listen for what's beneath the noise. And this is where the Spirit speaks, in the place beneath the noise, not to your ears, but to your spirit. He speaks in impressions, in burdens, in gentle movements of the heart, and many of those come when you are physically still, emotionally subdued, and mentally quiet. That strange tiredness you feel might be his way of shutting the door on the world around you so he can open a door within you. If you could only see how intentional he is, how delicately he leads, he sees what's ahead. He knows what you need, and sometimes what you need is not a new word or a new assignment. Sometimes what you need is him. Just him, his presence, his peace, his touch. And if you're too full, too fast, too busy, you will miss it. You will move past him in search of something more exciting, when in reality there is nothing greater than being with him. He doesn't shout. He doesn't compete. He waits. He waits for your spirit to respond. And often it is in those inexplicable moments of weakness that your spirit becomes aware. You are finally quiet enough, fragile enough, soft enough to recognize him. And when you do, oh, what glory! You will begin to realize that what you called tired was actually holy, that what felt like exhaustion was a blanket he laid over you so he could draw near. There's a kind of tiredness that leads to sleep, and then there's a kind that leads to awakening. When the Spirit is in it, that heaviness doesn't crush you, it opens you. It opens your heart, your ears, your spirit. And when he begins to speak, you realize he was never far. You were just too loud inside to hear him. So let him lead you even in this. Let him draw you away with gentle fatigue. Let him whisper to you when you expect a shout. Let the tiredness become a threshold instead of a barrier. And when you yield to it, when you lean in instead of pushing it away, he will meet you there. In ways more profound and more personal than you ever imagined. Because the Holy Spirit is not only powerful, he is near. He is kind, and he still speaks even through something as simple, as unexpected as strange tiredness. Stillness is something the modern heart has forgotten. We are constantly moving, chasing, planning, filling every moment with activity and noise. We equate stillness with waste, silence with emptiness, and rest with weakness. But the ways of the Spirit do not bow to the rhythm of the world. He moves on a different frequency, one that can only be heard when the soul becomes quiet enough to listen. Strange tiredness, that unexplained heaviness, may not be the enemy we often believe it to be. It might be the invitation, the very tool the Holy Spirit uses to create the stillness he needs in order to speak to you. You wake up and feel like your energy is missing, not because you didn't sleep, but because something inside of you has shifted. You go about your day, and everything feels a step slower, a bit more effortful, and the more you try to push through it, the heavier it feels. There is no illness, no sorrow, no visible cause, just a quiet resistance in your spirit. This is where the Spirit of God begins to move not with loud proclamations, but with a holy hush that descends on your heart. You try to shake it off. You blame it on emotions, on the weather, on being overwhelmed. You tell yourself to just get it together. But what if, in that stillness, the Spirit is drawing near? What if he is doing the very thing he has always done, creating a moment where he can speak not to your mind, but to your innermost being? He doesn't shout over the noise. He doesn't force himself in. He waits until the clamor of the world has died down inside you. And sometimes the only way to make that happen is to allow this unusual tiredness to settle in. Stillness creates room for sensitivity. When you stop running, you start perceiving. When your energy fades, your awareness heightens. You begin to notice things you never would have seen while busy, a shift in the atmosphere, a quiet nudge in your heart, a weight that feels more sacred than burdensome. These are not coincidences. These are spiritual signals. The Holy Spirit is attuned to the tiniest opening in your heart, and when he finds it, he enters with grace, ready to pour into you what you didn't know you needed. People often ask why God doesn't speak more clearly. But the truth is, he is always speaking. We are just rarely still enough to hear. Our thoughts are too loud, our emotions too cluttered, our schedules too demanding. But when strange tiredness comes, when everything in you starts to slow, that's your chance. That's the moment you get to choose. Will you keep pushing, or will you lean in? There's a sacred weight that falls upon a soul when the Spirit draws near. It doesn't come with noise. It doesn't come with fanfare. It comes with stillness, and that stillness, that slowness you feel, it is not the absence of power, it's the presence of preparation. He is preparing you for an encounter, preparing your heart to receive something that can't be delivered through distraction. You can't rush the things of God. They come when you're still enough to treasure them. Stillness doesn't just happen, it must be allowed. It must be embraced. The Holy Spirit uses moments of tiredness not to drain you, but to shift your posture. You begin upright, busy, confident, but by the time He is finished drawing you in, you're on your knees, surrendered, open, quiet. It is there that He can finally deposit what you've been missing, not always answered. Sometimes it's peace, sometimes clarity, sometimes healing in places you didn't know were broken. Think of how often Jesus withdrew to be alone, even when people needed Him, even when the demands were urgent. He understood that power flows from stillness, not from constant activity. He made space for the Father to speak, and if He needed that stillness, how much more do we? Strange tiredness is not always a disruption. It is often divine positioning. It's not your body failing, it's your spirit responding to the nearness of God. And when you finally stop trying to explain it, when you surrender to it, the stillness that follows is not empty. It is filled with Him. In that place, you find your spiritual senses waking up. You hear the whisper you missed before. You feel the conviction that couldn't get through the noise. You receive the direction you'd been praying for, but never had the space to recognize. All because you allowed yourself to stop, to become still, to listen with more than your ears. The Holy Spirit doesn't just come to visit. He comes to transform. But transformation begins when the heart becomes quiet. When the body ceases striving, when the soul finally says, "Speak, Lord, I'm listening." And often, that stillness doesn't come because we choose it. It comes because He leads us there even through strange tiredness. There are moments in life that feel like interruptions, inconvenient pauses that break your rhythm, shift your focus, and make you question what's happening within you. It might be a canceled plan, a door that suddenly closes, or an inexplicable tiredness that forces you to sit down when everything in you wants to keep moving. These interruptions can be frustrating. You were motivated, you had a schedule, you had momentum, but then something unexpected comes and slows you down. What if that something isn't just life being messy, but the Holy Spirit inviting you into a moment that's far more meaningful than your plans? God knows how to get your attention, and more often than not, He doesn't do it through chaos or drama. He doesn't always break in with a shout. Instead, He steps in quietly, gently, but with purpose. And sometimes He interrupts your day with strange tiredness, not because you're lazy, not because you're broken, but because He is calling you to a divine pause, a holy redirection, a moment that doesn't make sense on the surface, but carries deep spiritual weight beneath it. We think the Holy Spirit always moves in fire and power, and yes, He does. But He also moves in stillness. He also speaks in subtlety. You might have been on your way to do something good, something important, but then you find yourself unable to carry it through. Your strength drains, your mind becomes foggy, your heart feels heavy. That's not always something to resist. It could be something to recognize that He's shifting you away from what you had planned so He can reveal what He has planned. He is the master of redirection, and He doesn't owe you an explanation before He changes your course. What feels like inconvenience to you might be divine orchestration from Him. You were about to walk into something He didn't want you to face. You were about to say yes to a good thing that wasn't a God thing, and so to protect you, to guide you, to recalibrate you, He lets the interruption come. That strange tiredness might be the very thing keeping you from stepping into something that would have drained you far more deeply. There's a certain kind of fatigue that doesn't touch the body as much as it presses on the spirit. You try to ignore it, power through it, but the more you resist, the heavier it becomes. This is not your body giving up. This is the spirit pulling you back. He's calling you away, not to punish, but to protect. He's trying to change your pace so he can change your posture from striving to surrender, from movement to meditation. Sometimes we don't even realize we've drifted. We've become so wrapped up in momentum, in results, in keeping things together, that we forget what it's like to be led. The Holy Spirit doesn't want to be a passenger on your journey. He wants to lead it. And if that means interrupting your schedule, he will. If it means allowing a strange tiredness to settle over you so you'll finally pause, he will, because he knows what's ahead. He knows what you need. And he knows when it's time to shift direction. When you start to discern these divine interruptions, you begin to respond differently. Instead of frustration, you start asking questions. Lord, are you saying something? Holy Spirit, what are you trying to show me right now? That's the posture. He's after a heart that is open, a spirit that listens. Because once you recognize that he is speaking through the very thing you were about to dismiss, you realize the interruption isn't the end of your assignment, it might be the beginning of it. You may not receive a vision, you may not hear a voice, but in that quiet moment, as you slow down, something shifts, a realization comes, a word bubbles up. Peace begins to settle where anxiety was beginning to build. You start to feel him again. You recognize that he was never far. He was just waiting for you to slow down enough to notice him. This is the nature of his leading. It is not always logical, but it is always purposeful. He sees what we cannot. He anticipates what we're not even aware of. And in his mercy, he interrupts us not to delay us, but to redirect us. He draws us into secret places through the most unexpected means. And once we yield, once we stop resisting the fatigue and begin leaning into the moment, we find that what felt like a loss of energy was actually the beginning of a deeper encounter. The Holy Spirit isn't confined to church services or mountain hop experiences. He meets you in the pause, in the stillness, in the unplanned places where your spirit becomes soft enough to feel him. And so, when your plans fall apart, when your strength runs low, when everything in you wants to keep going, but you just can't stop. Not in defeat, but in awareness. He may be redirecting your steps, changing your direction with quiet authority, and leading you into something far greater than you would have found on your own. There is a mysterious space between what we understand and what we feel, a space where logic can't quite follow, but the spirit begins to awaken. That space is often entered through something most of us resist. A deep, strange tiredness that suddenly overtakes us without warning or cause. It's not just physical. It's not just emotional. It's as if something inside of you is being slowed down, hushed, as though heaven is drawing near and the only proper response is stillness. You may not understand it at first. You may even fight it. But if you'll pay attention, if you'll be willing to pause, you might begin to discern that what feels like weakness is actually a spiritual gateway. This is not exhaustion from work or from lack of sleep. This is a spiritual fatigue that settles on you like a thick cloud, and you feel as if you cannot press on in the same direction. You try to go about your day, but your energy fails you. Your mind can't focus. Your heart feels heavy. It's not depression and it's not distraction. It's something deeper, something quieter, something sacred. And while your first instinct may be to shake it off, to push through, that may be the very thing that causes you to miss the encounter the Holy Spirit is trying to bring you into. He moves differently than we expect. We often imagine divine visitations to be surrounded by light, clarity, and energy, but the Spirit of God sometimes cloaks himself in silence. He steps into your world not to energize your plans, but to bring them to a halt. Not because they're wrong, but because he wants to shift your attention from the external to the eternal. And so, he touches your inner world first, not with chaos, but with a stillness so heavy it almost feels like weariness. If you've ever experienced this kind of tiredness, you know it's not ordinary. It demands more than sleep. It doesn't lift with coffee or rest. That's because it isn't physical, it's spiritual, and in that tiredness, your soul is being summoned. Not to do more, but to be still, not to perform, but to perceive. You are being drawn into a moment that cannot be manufactured, it can only be received. When the Spirit begins to pull you aside like this, it often means he wants to speak in a way that will require all of your attention. Not just your ears, but your heart. He doesn't want to be a passing thought in a busy schedule. He wants to be the center of your gaze. He wants you fully present, and so, in mercy, he allows the disruption. He allows your strength to fail you so your dependence on him can rise. Because the truth is, we often don't listen until we're forced to slow down, and that is what this strange tiredness does. It slows you. It quiets you. It unsettles your rhythm just enough to make you wonder, what is this? And that question is a doorway. It is the moment your spirit begins to look up instead of forward. It's the moment the Holy Spirit has been waiting for. Because once you ask, once you pause, once you lean into what you don't understand, he speaks. Not always with words, sometimes with peace, sometimes with revelation, sometimes with nothing but his presence thick and wholly resting on you like a blanket. You begin to realize this tiredness wasn't a problem to solve, but a path to follow, a path inward, a path upward, a path into the sacred space where God speaks in whispers and ministers in silence. You find yourself becoming tender again, sensitive, awake in a way you didn't know you were asleep. And though nothing external has changed, everything inside of you begins to shift. You sense him, you feel his nearness, you remember what it means to rest in him instead of striving for him. We often miss these moments because we treat spiritual fatigue like an inconvenience. We medicate it, distract from it, or fight against it. But if we could only stop and look again, if we could listen to our spirit instead of our schedule, we'd see that what we were resisting was an invitation. The Holy Spirit doesn't always come in fire and noise. Sometimes he comes with a holy hush that settles everything within you and calls you to the quiet. And in that quiet, he heals, he reveals, he restores. He pours into the very places that have been drained by performance and pressure. He meets you not because you earned it, but because he missed you. He longed for that moment with you, and he knew you wouldn't come unless he drew you. So he did, and now, in the middle of what felt like weariness, you are actually being revived. The tiredness wasn't the enemy, it was the tool. It was the gentle hand of the Spirit turning your face back to him. Not to do more, not to figure things out, but just to be with him, to sit, to breathe, to receive, to be restored not by understanding, but by presence, his presence, and in that space, everything changes. There is a kind of weariness that doesn't make sense to the natural mind. It appears suddenly, often in the middle of something important. You could be in the middle of your assignment, in the thick of doing what you believe God has called you to do, when all at once your strength begins to fade. Your motivation feels hollow. Your heart grows quiet. It's as though something invisible presses in and tells you it's time to step back. But step back from what? You were just getting started. You were moving in faith. You were doing good, and yet this cloud of heaviness surrounds you, not as an enemy, but as something holy, something weighty, something deeper than emotion or fatigue. It doesn't feel like failure, it feels like being called away. When this kind of strange tiredness comes upon you, it is not something to fight. It is something to recognize. The Holy Spirit does not always lead through clarity and energy. Sometimes he leads through a veil, a divine fog that removes every distraction and demand, so that you are left with only one thing, your hunger for him. In these moments, he begins to strip away your usual pattern. Your productivity no longer satisfies, your plans feel lifeless, and you find yourself withdrawing not because you want to, but because something deep within you must. This is not spiritual decline. It is spiritual summoning. He is calling you out of your rhythm, not to leave you empty, but to fill you with something you didn't know you needed. We think we must always go, always do, always press forward, but the Spirit knows when your soul is due for a reset. He knows when your well is running dry. He knows when you've been pouring out so much that the inflow has been neglected. And so he interrupts, not to punish you, but to preserve you. You may not even understand what's happening at first. You'll feel out of sync with your surroundings. People will continue on with their energy, their conversations, their assignments, but you feel like your spirit is somewhere else. You try to pray and no words come. You try to worship and your voice feels faint. But in that stillness, in that quiet void where there are no fireworks and no fire, there is something profound, something deep, something eternal. God is working beneath the surface, realigning things in you that have been out of place. The strange tiredness becomes a cocoon. It surrounds you, it quiets you, it keeps you hidden for a moment, because the Spirit knows you can't fly until you're transformed. You can't walk into the next level with the same weight on your back. So he creates a divine pause, a resting chamber where the outer activity stops so the inner work can begin. It's not your defeat. It's your preparation. It's not the end. It's the place between what was and what will be. You must learn to welcome the pull, to recognize the symptoms of spiritual transition, because not every decline in energy is a sign of danger. Some are signs of destiny being rewritten, redirected, refreshed. If you lean into the moment rather than resist it, you'll begin to hear again, not with your ears, but with your spirit. The fog will start to feel like a shelter. The heaviness will become a place of communion. And you'll realize the tiredness was never about sleep. It was about silence. It was about solitude. It was about setting the table for something sacred. There is a stillness that carries more power than movement ever could. In that stillness, your senses are recalibrated. The Holy Spirit doesn't just want to visit you. He wants to reintroduce himself to you. He wants to bring you into a greater awareness of his presence, not through volume or drama, but through quiet saturation. He wants to awaken things in you that have been dormant, things that only come alive in the secret place. This is why you must not despise the divine slowdown. Don't curse the season that feels heavy. Don't label it as failure when it might be the very soil where your next breakthrough is taking root. Let the Spirit do what only he can do in that space. Let him remove the performance from your worship. Let him drain the striving from your service. Let him gently pull you out of the crowd so he can speak directly to your heart. There is such tenderness in his interruptions. You'll look back on them and realize that what you thought was weakness was actually grace. You'll remember how he met you, not when you were strong, but when you were still, and that stillness birthed revelation. That silence birthed strength. You weren't abandoned. You were being restored in the secret place where no one else could see, but where heaven was watching and working all along. When the strange tiredness comes again, and it will, don't panic. Don't rush. Don't assume you've done something wrong. Ask him, Holy Spirit, is this you calling me away? And then trust him enough to say yes. Trust him enough to let go of your schedule. Trust him enough to follow him into the mystery. Because on the other side of that divine tiredness is a renewal no human effort could ever produce. And it only comes when you let him lead you even through the stillness.